Hey guys, Aaron at JPC here, and today I'm going to walk you through on how to install your JPC Line Lock kit on your S550 Mustang. First thing we're going to do is look at what comes in the kit. Got your wire, your solenoids, your fittings, your electrical components, and your lines. Be sure to disconnect the battery before starting any projects on the car. We're going to start off by prepping the solenoids for installation. Always use some sort of thread sealant on the fittings before installing them. Right now you can see us using the 3AN fitting going into the brass side of the solenoid. And we're going to do the same thing with the thread sealant for the brass fitting going into the steel side of the solenoid. Do this for both solenoids. Make sure you use 2 wrenches when tightening the fittings. You want to make sure that you don't break the solenoid, and you want to also make sure that you don't spin any of the other fittings. The steel fitting can be tightened with 1 wrench. Just hold it firmly in your hand. For this installation, we're going to be using a lift. If you're doing this on the ground, be sure to use jack stands before starting your project. We're going to remove the front wheel from the car from both sides. We're going to remove the brake lines from both sides of the vehicle. There'll be a banjo bolt on the caliper and the hard brake line going to the top of the soft brake line. You can remove the top first using a wrench, and then you would use a wrench or a socket to remove the banjo bolt from the caliper. Recommend using a drain pan underneath to keep the mess. You can then remove the bolt that holds the brake line in place with the bracket from both sides of the car. Our next step is to mount the solenoid. For this installation, we pre-drilled the 2 holes for the solenoid. You don't need to because we supply 2 self-tapping screws, but it does make the installation easier. When doing this, you want to make sure you mount in a position where the hard brake line goes directly and straight into the brass fitting. Once you get it mounted in its position, you can use the self-tapping screws to secure it. This can be done for both sides of the car. Once the solenoid is mounted, start off by hand threading the hard brake line into the brass fitting. Once this is done, you can use a wrench to tighten down the hard brake line into the brass fitting. Again, this can be done on both sides of the vehicle. Use 2 wrenches when doing the final tightening on the hard brake line. Next, we're going to start assembling the stainless steel brake line. Make sure when you put the banjo bolt into the brake line, there's a washer on either side of the stainless steel brake line. Start off by hand threading the new banjo bolt into the caliper. Make sure the brake line is going directly up towards the top of the vehicle. Once you have it in place, you can use a wrench to tighten it. Then you can start installing the stainless steel brake line to the line lock solenoid. Start by hand threading, then use 2 wrenches to tighten it into position. Remove the inner fenders from both sides of the vehicle. This will allow you to run the wires through into the cabin. Wire the ground for the solenoid using the factory brake line bracket, hole, and bolt. Next, we're going to wire the power wires for the line lock solenoids. Put the heat shrink over the red wire and then strip about 1/4 inch of the wire. Usually we'll twist the wire to allow it to go into the butt connector easier. Here you can see us installing the butt connector onto the red side of the wire. Make sure it's a secure connection, and then strip the black wire off the solenoid. It doesn't matter which black wire you use, as long as one side is power and one side is ground. Again, make sure it is a very secure connection before moving forward. We're going to run the power wire for each solenoid into the cabin of the car. To do this, we're going to use the grommet in each wheel well that goes into the firewall. As you can see here, we're going to use a rod to push the wire through the grommet, and then we should be able to access it on either side of the wheel well. As you can see it coming through the floor on the driver's side here, and then on the floor on the passenger side there. You will need to pull the carpet back some. Here you can see how we have done the final wiring and routing in the wheel well of the car for this installation. We're going to build a power wire for our kit now, again using a butt connector and connecting it to the fuse holder that's supplied with the kit. Again, make sure you use heat shrink on the connection as we did before, as this is going to be a hot wire. We're going to connect this wire to one of the posts on the power junction panel on the passenger side of the vehicle, as you can see here. Make sure the nut is tight and make sure it's a nice secure connection. Install the fuse into the holder and shut the lid. What you see here is how we chose to route the power wire for this installation. We followed some of the wire routing we used for the solenoid on the passenger side. Next step, what we're going to do is remove the panel to the right side of the steering column. This can be used with a screwdriver or a panel removal tool. We're going to mark where we want the switch to be mounted into the panel. With this we used a punch just so we could mark where we wanted our hole. For this we used a 1/2 inch drill bit to put the hole through the panel. Make sure you measure twice. Install the switch into the panel as seen here. We're going to tap in the white side of the diode wire into the violet and white wire on the brake pedal switch as seen here using the supplied Scotch lock. Run the wires through the opening of where the panel was on the right side of the steering column. The large power wire will be connected to one side of the switch, and the 3 wires, which is the 2 solenoid wires and the red side of the diode wire, will be connected to the other using the 2 supplied eyelets, and then you can reinstall the panel to the right of the steering column. It'll snap back into place. The final step of this installation will be to bleed the brakes. We're not going to go over how to bleed the brakes in this, but we recommend looking at the factory manual for the factory procedure. If you guys have any questions about how to use the Line Lock kit, check out our other video on our YouTube page or on our website. If you have any questions about the install, give us a call at 410-729-0005 or check out our website at www.jpcracing.com.